And it's worth describing some of these videos because they are so hilarious. My favorite is this cute little 4-year-old boy who got neatly parted hair, and you can see he's really struggling. I mean, it's called the marshmallow task, but Walter actually gives them a choice between marshmallows, pretzel sticks, and Oreo cookies because some kids don't like marshmallows, and this kid chose Oreo cookies, and you can see about 30 seconds have gone by, and he's ready to pull out his hair. I mean, he is really having a difficult time, so he very carefully looks around the room, makes sure the scientist really has left. He conveniently ignores the video camera right here, and the large one-way mirror right here. And then he picks up the Oreo cookie, carefully unspools it, licks off the white cream filling, puts it back together, puts it down, and then he had no problem waiting. I asked Walter, where do you think this kid is now? And he was just joking. He said, I'm sure he's on Wall Street. But so when Walter first started studying these kids, he assumed that what drove self-control was how badly you wanted the marshmallow or the cookie. That maybe some kids had a big lunch or they had marshmallows at home, so it wasn't that exciting, so that was easier for you to wait. And there was lots of literature to back this up, that it was the intensity of the stimulus, how tempting it was, that actually dictated whether or not you could wait for it. But that turned out to not be the case at all. When you look at hundreds of 4-year-olds try to resist marshmallows, you quickly discover what actually allows them to wait. And what Walter found is that the kids who could wait the full 15 minutes, they were the ones who were able to distract themselves. So that was the secret to self-control and delayed gratification, was these were the kids who would get up and stand in the corner for 15 minutes. They would play with their shoelaces. They would pull on their pigtails. They would sing songs from Sesame Street. They would pretend to take naps. They would pretend the marshmallows were big, puffy clouds. In other words, they were the kids, and this is the language he used in the original paper, who had more metacognition. Interestingly, if you give this test to 3.5-year-olds, they all assume that the way to resist a marshmallow is to stare right at it. It makes a little bit of sense. You want to make sure it doesn't jump up and jump into your mouth. And some 4-year-olds act the same way. But some 4-year-olds, he says, have a little bit more metacognition. They think better about thinking, and they're able to realize that, if I'm staring at this marshmallow, if I'm focused on the temptation, I'm going to eat it. My self-control is weak. So what I've got to do is find some way to, as he put it, strategically allocate your attention away from the marshmallow, away from the cookie, away from the temptation itself, to temporarily forget about it. And that's what's going to actually allow you to wait the full 15 minutes. So that was, he published a couple papers on that in the early 70s on what actually allows kids to delay gratification. And he assumed, his research was done. He'd shown this role of metacognition in governing even the self-control of 4-year-olds. Then he started talking to his daughters, all of whom also went to the Bing Nursery School at around this same time. And he started asking them about their friends. And he'd say, how is Jane doing? And he'd say, oh, Jane's doing great. She's a straight A student. Walter would think, oh, that's kind of interesting because Jane could really wait for that marshmallow. He'd say, well, how is Joey doing? And they'd say, oh, Joey's a mess. Joey's, he's not doing well at all. He may not even graduate. Walter would think, oh, that's funny because Joey, he ate that marshmallow right away. And so he started to develop, he had enough of these conversations where he got this hunch that maybe there was some correlation, some relationship between the performance of kids at the age of 4 in the marshmallow task and how they were doing in high school. So we sent out this exhaustive survey to all the kids who had done the marshmallow task, more than 550 of them. He sent out the questionnaire to their parents, to their teachers, to school administrators. And what he basically found is that the most predictive test you can give a 4-year-old is the marshmallow task. That it's much more predictive than the IQ test. It's much more predictive than a verbal skills test. Much more predictive than any other test psychologists come up with to test the intelligence or the character skills of 4-year-olds. That for whatever reason, the simple test with a piece of sugar was very predictive. That it predicted their GPA, predicted how many friends they had, predicted whether or not they had temper problems, whether or not they'd experimented with drugs, whether or not they'd been suspended from school. The most impressive factor, I think, is that the difference between a kid who can wait 30 seconds and a kid who can wait 15 minutes at the age of 4 is that the kid who can wait 15 minutes has an SAT score 210 points higher than the kid who can't wait. And the reason, Walter argues, is that the same metacognitive skills that allow you to wait at the age of 4 also allow you to, when you're 15, say, I'd love to watch Jersey Shore, but I've got to do pre-algebra homework. So it finds some way to resist the thing you want to do for the sake of a long-term goal. It lets you align your thoughts. It lets you structure your thoughts so you can actually accomplish your long-term goal, even if it means a little short-term suffering. So it's the same basic skill set. It's learning how to control the one thing you can control, which is actually where your attention is directed, to control that spotlight of attention, to control which thoughts are actually in that bit of consciousness we can actually control. And that skill is so important, being able to control that, modulate it, being able to align it for the sake of a long-term goal, that it dictates how well you can resist a marshmallow and also how well you can do in school. And he's still following these 4-year-olds, now in their 40s, and he sees all the same correlations in terms of income, in terms of body mass index, that these are still the same kids who could resist. The ones who tend to succeed are still the same kids who could resist a tempting treat. Now, there is, I think, something, and we should all acknowledge it, something a little depressing about this research. It seems to suggest that we should just screen every 4-year-old, give them a marshmallow or two, and if you can't pass the marshmallow test, should we really waste 12 years of school on you? Just being blunt. It seems to suggest that there's something very deterministic. It's character and personality at its most deterministic. That some people are either pre-built for academic success and life success, and some people aren't. And I think that's the exact wrong conclusion to draw from the marshmallow task. It's the conclusion plenty of people have drawn. I think it's the exact wrong conclusion. And I think the real answer, the real point of the marshmallow task and the real importance of it becomes clear in another set of experiments Walter's done with kids in the South Bronx. So these are kids who, in general, perform low on the marshmallow task. They have a slightly tougher time waiting, and this builds upon a large body of research linking delayed gratification to socioeconomic status, and that's a whole complicated other story. But to make a long story short, they have a tougher time resisting marshmallows. But then Walter found that if you gave these kids a crash course in metacognition, a 5-minute lesson in how to think about a tempting treat, so you tell them, for instance, why don't you just try to distract yourself? If you show them a video of some other 4-year-old successfully resisting the treat by standing in a corner or singing songs from Sesame Street. If you told these kids, and this is my favorite one, if you told them, just draw a picture frame around the marshmallow. So it's still there, but it just seems like a picture of a marshmallow, not a real marshmallow. All of a sudden, these kids, some of whom couldn't wait 20 seconds, can now wait 20 minutes. I know some of the highest performers on the marshmallow test. You've simply given them, in a sense, a user manual to their own mind. You've told them, you know what, here's how you should think about this. You told them, you've shown them how to think about thinking, and that transformed their performance. He's now looking at this along with people like Angela Duckworth at Penn. They're going to KIPP schools all across the country and seeing if these skills generalize, if you can give kids a crash course in metacognition, and whether or not that's just about marshmallows or food or treats, or whether or not they can apply these same lessons to their homework. And this is obviously a long-term longitudinal study, but I think there's good reason to believe that these skills will generalize, that changing the way kids think about thinking has huge implications. And I think it should change the way we think about education, at least in the early years too. Just in terms of, we talk about character skills a lot in kindergarten, and then that whole side of the report card just disappears when there's so much evidence to suggest these character skills aren't just nice and they're too important to simply trust parents with. These are things we have to be teaching because they can be taught. And this, I think, brings me back to art. Because I think when you read someone like Proust, or you read To the Lighthouse, or read Virginia Woolf, the reason this art endures, or you watch, Bill T. Jones, dance. What you're learning about, in essence, is human nature. You're learning about how your memory works. You're learning about how expressive the human body can be. These aren't just works of beauty. They're also teaching us how we think. So when you read, it's one of my favorite scenes in literature, Into the Lighthouse, that great dinner party scene where she's talking about beef stew, and she takes you inside each mind as they look at each other and look at the beef stew and taste the beef stew and then look back at each other. And she takes you inside the act of attention. She shows you how the mind works, how people think. And that, I think, is the revelation. That, I think, is why the art is still being read, why this modern